Greetings from Tokyo, I'm Trip, and welcome to the Hammer of Rad. This week, you and I are going to talk about Space Marine 2. Let's go. Thanks for joining me in the studio. This week, you and I are going to talk about Space Marine 2. And I'm also going to let you know how you can win a free copy of the game. But first, I want to talk about arcades. Now, when I was a kid growing up, arcades were a huge part of our social scene and remain so all the way through my college years. But if you live in the States, you know that that's just no longer the case. But in Japan, things are very different, and arcades continue to thrive to this day. It is not uncommon to find a massive game center wherever there is a large train station or multi-rail hub. Now, of course, most of these game centers consist of UFO catchers, or what we would call crane games or games of chance, where you can plunk in a few dollars for the chance to win a Minecraft plush or some sort of anime good. However, in places like Akihabara, where we shot this week's introduction, it is possible to find old-school video game arcades. And I happened to stumble across one last week while showing some out-of-country visitors around the area. And this one in particular was 5 stories tall, with each floor being dedicated to a specific game type. On the ground floor, of course, were all the UFO catchers, where passers-by could see all of the goods they could possibly win. On the second floor, it was entirely racing games, including these massive linked cabinets for different kinds of racing games, from Mario Kart all the way through to racing sims. On the third floor were all the retro shooters you could possibly imagine, and on the fourth floor, where I found myself and my friends spending most of the afternoon, was nearly every fighting game ever made. If you have a favorite Capcom game, it was here. Marvel vs. Capcom 1, 2, or 3, they've got it. X-Men vs. Street Fighter, they've got it. Children of the Atom, they've got it. Any version of Street Fighter you could possibly imagine, they had in a brand new, pristine cabinet. Now, in my college days, which was quite a while ago, I used to be really good at Street Fighter. In fact, on occasion, I would travel up to San Jose for statewide tournaments. And I'm not going to say that I came home with any top prizes, but every time I entered, I was able to place respectably within the rankings. However, playing Street Fighter in Japan can be a sobering experience if you think you have any real skill. Suffice to say, I spent $1 or $2 attempting to defend my pride, but quickly came to the realization that I was grossly outclassed. Well, that's enough about arcades and how they are still alive and kicking here in Japan. Let's talk about Space Marine 2. Regular viewers of the channel may know that the reason I am even involved in the hobby at all is because of Space Marine 1. Released for the Xbox 360 and PS3 in 2011, it was my introduction into the world of Warhammer. I borrowed a copy from my good friend Aaron, and having played through the game, I was immediately hooked. The next weekend, I took my very first trip to a Games Workshop store and walked away with the 5th edition starter set and half a Tyranid army. But getting involved with the tabletop game only enhanced my experience and didn't stop me from playing the video game. I spent countless hours in Horde mode and the multiplayer modes, and I even paid for the additional DLC cosmetic packs as well as the Dreadnought Battle expansion. Shortly after the game was published, both the studio that created it, Relic Entertainment, and THQ, the publisher, fell under hard times. And THQ even went bankrupt and had to sell off their IPs and completely restructure. And despite how well the game did, what that meant was that there was zero chance for a game from the same developers. The idea of a sequel was long, long dead. So imagine the community's shock and surprise when 3 years ago they announced a sequel. And this last September, on the 9th, the game finally launched after much anticipation. If you had told me in 2012 I'd have to wait another 12 years to a sequel, I wouldn't have believed you. but here we are. And the launch of the game was a smashing success. Saber Interactive, the new developer, and Focus Home Entertainment, the publisher, have released their launch numbers, and over 4.5 million copies of the game have been sold, and it has been met with critical acclaim across the board. Now, how did I think the game stacks up after waiting 13.5 years for it? Well, overall, I greatly enjoyed the experience. Let's talk a little bit about the campaign. The campaign is a direct continuation of the story from Space Marine 1. At the end of the first game, Captain Titus is hauled off by the Black Templars and the Inquisition because he has been in such close proximity to a tainted Chaos artifact and shows no signs of corruption. The sequel opens over 100 years later and sees you once again in control of, this time, Lieutenant Titus because of his demotion during the Inquisition, who is recently reinstated into the Ultramarines to reprove himself. Now, I found the campaign to be a complete joy to play, and much of it is highly reminiscent of how the first game played. Not only are there really great ranged weapons, although we're going to have to pour one out for the Vengeance Launcher, which does not make an appearance in this game. And of course, there's also that amazing up-close, visceral combat using chain swords and other weapons. The game strikes a really great balance between the two playstyles, and much of the level design and layout is very similar to the first game, including several sections where you're given a jump pack and a thunderhammer to just wreak holy havoc against the foes of the Emperor. As a power fantasy, it succeeds triumphantly, and there's a fantastic twist at the end of the story that I'm not going to spoil. Now, the multiplayer mode in the sequel is a bit of a different story in that I found it to be a bit lacking. Compared to the offering of the original game, it's a little anemic. Now, although I have not spent as much time in the PvP mode as I have in the PvE and campaign modes, I have played enough to sort of be disappointed in what is offered. You can, of course, customize one of your 6 classes very similarly to how you can in the co-op mode, but unfortunately there are only 3 maps and 2 game modes, and as a multiplayer offering, that's just not enough. I am hopeful that they will expand this in the future as they have added missions to the operations mode, but the community really needs more maps and game types. What I was most excited about beyond the continuation of Titus's story was the operations mode. When this was revealed, I thought it was a unique take on a co-op multiplayer experience. There would be multiple missions with random spawn points that you could play over and over again with your friends at different difficulties, and they would be different each time. Now, for the most part, this does play out in much the same way as Left 4 Dead, in that the levels can be enjoyed again and again because of the randomized spawns of the enemies, power-ups, and events within the levels. However, it does have its shortcomings. On launch, I found it pretty difficult. Now, before the cries of "get good" flood the comment section below, I've been playing video games since the Atari 2600. I know what I'm doing. But this was hard. Even on the easiest difficulty as a new player, it was a bit punishing. Now, of course, most of the missions are split between Tyranid enemies and Chaos enemies, and what I found rather quickly is that the Tyranid enemies were fun to fight, even though they were difficult, and the Chaos enemies were no fun to fight at all. There was a massive imbalance in the difficulty there, and the number of Zangors that would spawn in with shields and block a Thunderhammer was absolutely infuriating, so my local friends group just didn't play the Chaos levels at all. Now, a few weeks after the launch of the game, they did patch that mode and decrease the difficulty across the board, but many players, including myself, actually feel that they tipped the scale too far in the other direction, and I was able to make my first ruthless clears. But I did appreciate the changes to the Chaos levels, which made them much more enjoyable. Now, since then, they added another patch to the operations mode, sort of moving the needle back in the other direction and adding an additional difficulty level, Lethal, which I tried once and realized is not for me. Now, with the new difficulty that was added in the most recent patch, the developers also added a really interesting mechanic in which all 3 of the Marines had to be within a certain radius of each other to do things like get health back from completing executions. However, the player base immediately revolted against this because it broke the fundamental mechanics of the game. If you were playing as the Vanguard and wanted to use your grapnel to zip ahead to a target, or if you were playing as the Assault and wanted to take to the skies and burst forward to smash into a group of Hormagaunts, you couldn't really do that, because doing so put you outside of that perimeter and you wouldn't get your health back. Fortunately, however, the developers were listening to community feedback and very quickly removed that system from the game. Now, in the operations mode, I'm having a great time playing as the Heavy. It was my favorite class in the first game, and there was just something about being able to plant your feet and just saying no to everything that comes within your range. But I have hit the level cap on several of the other classes, including the Sniper, Tactical, and Assault. And in playing the Assault, even though I'm having a pretty good time, I am puzzled by the choice of the developer to limit the use of the jump pack. In the single player and multiplayer modes, it can be used as a form of traversal. Hitting the jump pack rockets you high up into the air above the battlefield, and it makes it much easier to choose your target for your meteoric smash back down to the earth. But for whatever reason, in the operations mode, when you hit the jump pack, you only jump about twice as high as your own height. It makes it really difficult to choose your targets, and because you can only go where the reticle is, it can't be used as a traversal tool to get up to higher ground or jump over obstacles. Why they chose to do this in only this mode, but leave it to be so powerful in both the PvP and the campaign mode, is sort of beyond me. But despite those frustrations, I still play that class because it is the only one that has access to the Thunderhammer, and, well, I'm not gonna play the Thunderhammer. Now, despite the fact that you have to play as the Ultramarines in the campaign mode for story purposes, in both of the multiplayer modes you can play as any chapter you like, and the level of customization is a little crazy. Not only can you choose from dozens of preset chapters like the Dark Angels, Blood Angels, Space Wolves, Ultramarines, or other first founding chapters, you can also create your own chapter, choosing the colors that you like all the way down to the individual armor pieces. Now, my single complaint here is that most of the colors don't look enough like the paints they're named after, and unlocking them is a bit of a chore. Instead of being able to simply use the credits you've earned in-game to unlock the paint color you want, they're often buried deep within a chapter set. You sort of have to dig your way to them, spending your credits on things like chapter symbols or iconography that you're not interested in. But using the editor, you are able to create really cool custom chapters and customize existing chapters. Now, although you have access to almost all of the weapons in the game during the campaign, in the operations and multiplayer modes, the level of weapon customization is also really exceptional. Every weapon in the game can be ranked up from its base level all the way to relic tier. And in doing so, you unlock mastery points. And each weapon has its own skill tree and can be customized to your playstyle. If you're using a power sword and you want to tune that so that you're really good at dealing with the larger enemies on a one-to-one duel, you can do that. If you want to take that same weapon, change the perks around and make it so that it's great for cutting through swaths of enemies at the same time, then you can do that as well. The level of customization changing the playstyle is exceptional here, and I laud the developers for doing it. Now, I would be remiss for not mentioning the occasional bug that comes up during the game, and I'm not talking about the Tyranids, like this when I do a custom execution, and the camera just sort of goes crazy and zooms all over the arena before returning to my character. I also got this one on occasion where I went to pick my loadout in-game and was met with what looked like a spreadsheet. And of course, occasionally, the Tyranids like to get a cheeky shot through hard cover. But the additional year that Saber Interactive took to polish the game actually shows, and things like this are rather uncommon. Now, taken as an entire package, with the really great campaign mode that furthers Lieutenant Titus's story, the really great operations mode, which has seen several shifts in balance and new missions added, and the PvP mode, which could offer more but is still pretty satisfying, the game is truly a worthy successor to the original, and in fact, in many areas has surpassed what was offered. I am personally really excited about the re-edition of Horde mode, which is what I spent most of my time playing in the original game. Now, I'm sure most of you have already purchased the game and have been enjoying it for several weeks, but if you are on the fence, I've got great news: the opportunity to win a free copy. I've partnered with Focus Entertainment, and they've provided me 2 codes for the Xbox version of the game. If you'd like to win one of these codes, all you have to do is join our Patreon at any level. Joining at any level grants you access to our private Discord server where we will hold a raffle for the codes. Now, when you join our Patreon, not only do you get access to our private Discord server where like-minded hobbyists help each other out every day with honest and kind feedback, but at higher tiers you also get access to things like voting for video topics and behind-the-scenes vlogs. And of course, since the launch of Space Marine 2, we use the Discord to group up and battle the enemies of the Emperor together. So if you'd like to play with me and the other members of my community, be sure to check out the Patreon linked in the description below. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. It was my genuine pleasure to make and share it with you. If you'd like to help out the channel, like, comment, and subscribe. Help drive us to the front page of YouTube and grow our audience. We are getting close to 10,000 subscribers. And when I launched the channel 2 years ago, I honestly didn't think it would be this big. So I can't thank you all enough for your support. Thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you on the next one.